Today, we join long-term resident and local historian Bev Cornwell as she chats to Julia Hill about the history of our town. Bev has a regular column published in the Hervey Bay Observer, which documents the history.
Bev, it's lovely to meet you.
Yes, Julia.
Thank you for coming here to have an interview with me. So we'd just be talking about how Hervey Bay was, back in the day, that type of thing. So I've heard that you came to Hervey Bay in 1955.
1955, yes.
And what were your first impressions of the Bay?
Well, I was only 10 then, and we lived right out in Mount Street, Point Vernon.
Yeah.
So back in those days, to live that far out, it was almost like from here to Brisbane, because to go to town was a long way, because mostly you just went by push bike to school.
Yeah.
In those days, going to school, if it was a northerly blowing, it pushed you to school, and then in the afternoon you had to really pedal hard to get all the way home.
Yeah.
And back in those days, it was more vacant blocks of land along the front, because there wasn't many houses.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me, when I first came here, which was 2002, I think. Yeah, my house was just being built, and around it there was a whole heap of vacant blocks. So still, it's still quite developing since even then. But yeah, I found it a lovely place too.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
That's right.
Yeah. And how were the schools here when you first came?
Well, Pyalba School, there was 3 schools in the Bay, Urangan, Torquay and Pyalba. I think they've got a big one out of Nicobar, I'm not too sure. The school was only very small compared with what it is now. It was just the one big building, and then they had the domestic science for the girls, and then the manual arts for the boys. It was facing Ellis Street. I think now a lot of it's faced into Beach Road. It was more united than what it is now, because it was just the primary school up to grade 8, and then there was the high top, which is high school there, which was before the actual Great Hall opened, and the big high school there on that part of the bay.
Yeah, so it seems to have developed quite a lot since then, because since we've just said Urangan, Torquay and Pyalba, we've now got Kawangan, Sandy Straits, and all these other
There's
schools.
many schools, years.
Fraser Coast, it's a lot's going on, but I think it's for the better, do you? I think
well, you've got to cater for the population.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be a retirement area, but there are lots and lots of families with young children.
Yeah, lots are coming in.
That's right.
Growing very rapidly. So, about how has the tourism business grown as you've been here?
Well, when I left school, I worked in Main Street, Pyalba, for Murphy and Sons, which was one of the original shops. Well, it was the original shop, and I worked there. And tourism, back in those days, it was Hervey Bay was more or less a little fishing village for Maryborough, and businesses in Maryborough like Stupard's, Kingston's, a lot of those big business owners owned homes on the bay, which were retirement homes. Therefore, it wasn't until holidays like Christmas, Easter, there was a big influx of people, but most of the year there was just no visitors at all. It was just a normal bay.
It's another thing that's grown, is it, I guess, because now we're promoted as the whale watching capital of the world, and we get a lot of tourists come here, and apparently we're going to have cruise ships come here around Kingfisher Bay, for example.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah, so it is a rapidly growing region. I think for like the short amount of time that it was just like
whales weren't even heard of.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend who used to be a fisherman, and they knew about the whales out there, because they'd go right out fishing with their trawler, and they knew about the whales until the Perrys discovered them in the 80s, I think it was, and the whale industry started then.
Yeah.
But they've been out there for a long time, but just nobody in the bay knew about them.
Yeah, well, It was a good discovery for the Bay, I think.
It was wonderful. It's
Yeah.
made the Bay, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It's basically shaped like this place and this region. I
Well,
guess.
we're still known as the whale capital of the world, I think, yes.
Yeah, so that is lovely.
It is lovely.
And so how was it having a family here in this growing up?
Well, when I was a child, if you got sick, most people had to go to Maryborough,
Yeah.
to the hospital up there, because there was no hospital in the Bay here until the 1960s. And you'd go up to Maryborough. A trip to Maryborough back in those days was a big event.
Yeah.
It was almost an all-day event, and you'd go up to the outpatient section in the Maryborough Hospital, and you'd sit there waiting to see the doctor. And there were some private doctors. There was a Dr. Hooper up there. That was one that I know, Dr. Langdon, I think. But mostly, because I was the eldest of a family of 6, we just went to the public hospital up there.
Yeah.
And if anyone was sick, there was doctors down the Bay that you could go to, but I can't remember actually going much to the doctors down here. And then during the course of the injections, polio and that sort of thing, I think we were all given that at school, and I think that was back in the days where they had the little drop on the spoon, and you had it that way. Earlier on it was the needle, the polio injection or triple antigen, which was a whole 3. But mostly I can remember having the polio injection on this little spoon.
Yeah, it's different to what we have now. So, yeah, from maybe 1980 onward, how did you find the Bay? How was it? How had it changed?
1980, well, that was when I finished work it was Murphy's had been taken over by Stylers, who was Bill Styler, had shops in Maryborough, and he took over Murphy's down here and run it as a big grocery store. Yeah, the shop hours back in the, going right back to when I worked at Murphy's, you shut half day Wednesday and you opened all day Saturday. And that was a chance to give Bay people a chance to go to Maryborough if they wanted to. Then, during the 70s, Jack the Slasher opened in Maryborough, and that was before you got to the drive-in up there. And that was the first place that came into this area where you could go and buy boxes of anything. You know, if you wanted to buy a box of, say, baked beans or something like that. And that was very, very popular, and it drew a lot of people from Hervey Bay, because before that it was just Murphy's in Pyalba, and then there was a little shop down at PCC or something down at Scarnett's, which was a shop for that area, but mostly all the people's shopping was done in Pyalba at Murphy and Sons, and then Stylers when he opened. Everyone would come in with their little shopping list and give to the man behind the counter, a pound of butter and so much sugar, and that would all get weighed up out the back. I can remember when I worked there, you would weigh up sugar. One very funny, well, probably not funny for the person who bought it, but somebody mixed the sugar and the salt up. So they bought a pound of salt, a pound of sugar. When they got home it was a pound of salt, but they didn't know they put it in their tea, so they soon went out of the salt.
Yeah, that would have been a good experience.
But everything was weighed up, your butter and all those sort of things, not like it is today.
Yeah,
and you imagine going into a shop now and handing your grocery order across the counter to someone behind the counter. But that was back in the Bay when the population was only about 2,500 people, so it was a bit different. Yeah. And Maryborough was going ahead before the Bay. There was Jack the Slasher opened up there, and then a Coles, and that drew a lot of people to Maryborough. I can remember as a child going to Maryborough in the main street of Maryborough, and there was a Woolworths there, and that was the first time you could go in and buy something over the counter, and they had it all on display. And that was the early, a lot of the American influence was starting to come out here, and that Woolworths in Maryborough was just amazing as a child to go up there and see things displayed. Another thing I was going to bring up, if there was a funeral, back in those days, people didn't get cremated and was mostly go out to the Paulson Cemetery at Point Vernon. Therefore, if we knew there was a funeral on, if you got the notice out of the paper, someone would stand outside the shop, and all the shops in the area would shut their doors as a mark of respect. As the corsage went down Main Street on the way out to the cemetery, and people would stop, and the cars would all pull to the side, men would stop, take their hats off. Now, you're talking about the 80s. I finished work at Stylers and I started working out at Tricare in Point Vernon as a carer. I started off as a carer and then I became a diversional therapist working with the aged care. The Bay's population was really starting to increase then. There was more and more people finding out about our beautiful Hervey Bay.
Yeah.
And we changed a little bit from being a little shipping, fishing village. Yeah, that's right. To what similar to what we are today.
Yeah.
My husband was working on the council, and I know from what he says about how it all started to explode, and there was more and more development going on.
Yeah.
In the early 1982, Woolworths was the first big shop to open here in the Bay. And then that was followed by Coles, and then later on in the 90s, I think the first one to open was McDonald's. McDonald's, or one of those fast food places. Shop followed by Bay Central, which was called Stockman's, was first called Bay Central, and that was all built on what used to be cane fields up there. Many cane fields. There was lots of cane fields in the Bay back in those days.
Yeah.
And Bunnings was all built on cane fields as well. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing to think, because when I came here, all that was developed.
That's right.
Yeah, and when I think of that now, it seems a bit peculiar, really, just to imagine that as just cane fields
And Boat Harbour Drive was just 2 lanes.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, modern girl, Generation Z, so.
But that's progress, though.
Yeah, it can happen for the better or for the worse, but I think for Hervey Bay, I think it's happening for the better, I think, and how we're going with that, so.
Well, it's certainly developing. Let's hope that we still retain what we've got here as a nice, peaceful, homely family place for people to come and have holidays.
Yeah, it is a lovely place.
It is a lovely place, and I love Hervey Bay, and I tell anybody who's retired here, they've retired to the best place in the world.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, I feel very lucky to be living and growing up here.
How long have you lived here?
Since 2002, so that'd be about 12 years.
12 years.
13.
Yeah.
So it is lovely living here.
I've now got to know other parts of the Bay more than I did, because like when I was younger, I knew Point Vernon and Pyalba.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got into my teens that we would go down to Scarness, because that's where the rock and roll sessions, and the skating rink was down there, and I started to find out there was such a thing as boys. That's why we would still ride our push bikes. Everything was by push bike back then.
Yeah, not by like car or something like that, or walking down the street with a phone and that.
Oh no, there was no such thing as phones. You answered the phone on the wall.
Yeah. Oh, I still do that. Good, I'm not really too technologically swayed, but yeah, I still have a small.
No, don't let them take over your life.
Yeah,
There's another side of life besides mobile phones.
Yeah, definitely. So we're getting into the 90s now, isn't it? And around the 2000s. So this is one thing I'd like to know is about the millennium. I never get that word right, but yeah, how was that, Hervey Bay?
Well, I think everybody feared that what was going to happen at the year 2000, whether the computers are all going to explode.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
That wasn't just Hervey Bay, that was the whole world. Wondered whether the date would just turn over to the year 2000 or whether everything would crash, but nothing happened. It just all turned over automatically and we just went on with life.
Yeah, it must have been big hoax or something like that. Yeah, so Yeah, that was the year I was born. I wasn't there for. I was born in August. I wasn't there for the start of the year.
What year were you born?
2000.
For years. So.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. So I used to live in on a farm at Remuran, but before I moved up here in 2002 with my family. Yeah, and yeah, it has been it's a good move, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a lovely place.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I worked in the aged care industry, it was lovely to hear the stories that a lot of the people in there are all from farms, the farming life, and it was great to listen to their stories.
Yeah.
It's a great asset to be able to listen. So many people like to talk, but it's also very good. It's a skill to listen to what people have to say.
Yeah, and by listening you learn a whole lot more.
Exactly.
I guess like I am now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And working in the aged care industry, the old people like to talk.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to listen to what they're saying, and they've got such wonderful, wonderful stories.
Yeah.
And that's when I started a thing called the Golden Originals in 1998, and that was getting a heap of the old Bayites together and to talk about all their memories of the Bay. And it was just absolutely wonderful. If I gave a lot of happiness to them, they gave a lot of happiness back to me. To have these people to get together each year. And now it's very sad because I stopped it a couple of years ago. I stopped in 2013, and now it's very sad because we meet more at funerals. Because a lot of these people, 50. I started in 1998, and say people in their 70s came along then. Well, 15 years on puts them to 90, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And a lot of them in their late 80s, and a lot have gone. The original 38 people I had at the Golden Originals, over half of them have now gone.
Yeah.
Just passed away, which just nature happens.
Yeah, it's the course of life.
It is exactly.
Yeah.
We don't live forever.
Yeah, there's no such thing as immortality or something like that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, but the Bay's a lovely place, and let's hope that it retains its uniqueness.
Yeah, because it'd be sad to see if all these skyscrapers went up, even though I don't know if they could, but it'd be sad to see.
No, we don't want it to change, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's a really nice place how it is now, and it just would be great if it stayed like this.
That's right.
Yeah, it is.
I've spoken to a few people just recently who had moved to the Bay, and they said that they moved here because as soon as they got here they felt the warmth and the friendliness of the place.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's what we can retain.
Yeah. I really hope so. So I'm 14 now, and how was it like for you when you were my age?
At 14, I don't think my dad would have let us go down to Scarness back in those days to the rock and roll days.
Yeah.
So I think still at school, we made our own fun. I was going to mention an Aboriginal man who I used to know back in those days called Benny Gala, who lived out not far from where I lived in Point Vernon. And I grew up with some of his children and went to school with them. And wonderful. They were real Aboriginals, they were real black people.
Yeah.
But colour meant nothing to us. They went to school with us.
Oh, yeah.
And that was I'd say I was about 14 when we still went to school with them. Then did high school in High Top at Pyalwa because the big high school wasn't built then.
Yeah.
What else did we do back in those days? It wasn't until I was in my teens that I think my dad would allow me to. Dad was very strict.
Yeah.
We used to go to the pictures. There used to be the Seaview Picture Theatre, and Dad would take the whole family. I mean, it wasn't cheap to go to the movies with a family of 6 kids.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And that was just a picture theatre in Watson Street, Pyalwa. There was also a picture theatre down at Scarness, but we never went down there. Dad would load the car up and take us all to the pictures at the Seaview boarding house. Seaview Picture Theatre in Watson Street. What else did we used to do? We made our own fun, a lot of it.
Yeah.
We used to spend a lot of time down the beach at Point Vernon. We'd go swimming. That was something you could go all day. Your parents never had to worry. You when you got tired, when you got hungry, you came home. You could be gone all day. You didn't seem to get sun, but I know we were very brown because we spent all day in the sun.
Yeah.
And it was very safe because there didn't seem to be any dangers for you to go out back in those days.
Yeah.
Like I say, we made our own fun. You played things like rounders on the beach and probably built sand castles, that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
What else? A lot of good friends we had. And you'd have birthday parties too, and you'd invite all your friends around, that sort of thing. They're not all that much different from things that happen today as well.
Yeah, we still have birthday parties and, all that celebrations and that.
I just always remember the days of the push bike because there was no cars like there is today.
Just making a comparison to what my friends and I do when we have free days. As you said, you went to the beach and made your own fun.
We made our own fun.
Yeah, you had a great time, but just now I think everyone's just on their computers and phones and everything.
That's right. It's very, very sad.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And we climb trees. Me and girls and climb trees.
Yeah. I love climbing trees. I'll just tell you the story here, but I was at school. Maybe the branch of the tree, probably about that high. I sat on it and I wasn't allowed to because I could hurt myself, apparently. And that.
But that's a lesson in life, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We've all got to learn our lessons in life, and children today are stopped from learning their lessons.
Yeah.
You fall over, you skin your knee, you fall out of a tree, you hurt something, even if you break an arm.
Yeah.
But it's a lesson learned.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that that's getting taken away because of litigation and all those sort of things.
Yeah. That's because I'm used to climb at the Scarness Park. Since I've been 3, I climb that tree every time I see it, and it's really lovely. I love climbing trees. It's one of my pastime favourites.
It's not just boys that climb trees; girls like climbing trees too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We have the mobility tracks around Hervey Bay and the region, but I've noticed that near the Freedom Park, where we have the Anzac Days, there's a train station there. How did that work back in the day?
It was just wonderful. In fact, that's the way a lot of people communicated to Maryborough as far as people who worked in Maryborough. A lot of my friends used to catch the train early in the morning, 7 o'clock, and go up to Maryborough, work all day. And this was back when they get into their teenage years or in years when they worked at solicitors and different things in Maryborough. Also the train, going back to the days when, this is even before my days, cattle used to come in on the train to the bay here, and they would get offloaded there at the back of the shops, just down from where the railway station is, and then they were taken out by horse back out by road out to McIver slaughter yards, and then going, or more in the 70s, the train used to come. We lived up in McIver Street, and at 7:15 every morning you'd hear the train, the whistle, as it come down through Coonamble, and it came into Pyalba, and then it went off down to Urangan, because it didn't just go to Pyalba, it went to Urangan too, and that's where it went down there, and the oil, and if we're going back a long, long way, it used to get sugar from the pier. The train went out along the pier and got sugar. What else? There was coal, porters there as well, and fuel. There was lots of things. No, though the train was great, and it was a shame when it. I think, the last train would have been probably in the 70s.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Might have even been later. But always a lot of people, no, it was still coming into the bay, definitely in the 80s. And it would, like I say, at 7, people would time themselves by 7:15 in the morning, the whistle would blow, and that was the train coming into the bay.
Yeah.
And it would bring a lot of the goods into the bay. Now today everything's done by rail, not by rail, by road.
Yeah.
and eventually the old train line was pulled up and the train disappeared. Therefore, the corridors are still through the bay.
Yeah, it seems a shame. That
It is a shame.
Because it seemed like a great, communication between Maryborough and Hervey Bay, as well as production in that. So, and even now, even if we have road transport, we could use it as some historical, not really that much, but like a tour of Hervey Bay or something like that. But
well, one thing I haven't mentioned about somewhere you went back in the. I went back to as far back as I can remember. Was always the railway picnic. And that was always held, well, some years it was held at Scarness, but mostly it was held down at Torquay. And that was, the train would bring people from all over, like Gympie, Bundaberg. The train would come down, it was almost like with people hanging off it coming down to the railway picnic. They would get down to the railway station at Torquay, they would unload, and a pipe band would bring them down to all the people down to the front, and they would have big tents set up, and the kids would all line up, and they would all be given a ticket, and they would get ice cream back in those days, or a little bucket ice cream. You had a little spoon that you used to eat it with, a bucket of ice cream, and a packet of fruit, and a drink, probably cordial. I don't think they had much. Soft drinks back in those times. You were all given a cordial. But the railway picnic was great, and they would have sand garden contests and everything there. And that was the highlight of the year, and it was run by the people who controlled the trains. And that goes right back to the 1930s.
Oh, wow.
Might even be earlier than that. And it was very, very popular, the railway picnic.
Yeah, that would have been great to go to.
Yes, I've got photos of us I was still at school, so I'm a schoolmate, so probably around about late 1950s. Yeah, railway picnic. Yeah. And I think it finished about 1972 would have been the last railway picnic. Yeah, very, very popular.
Yeah.
Exceedingly, probably the highlight of the year for a lot of people was the railway picnic. And the Maryborough show was another big function we went to each year too, and that was where Chelsea Nursing Home is up there in Maryborough, was where the original showgrounds were. And it was, I think, probably in May. I think the show's always been in May each year. And the population of the bay, such as it was, would all head off up to Maryborough back in those days, yes. Yeah. And also the bay carnies, that was another thing we used to have. Yeah, a lot of these things come back to me as I'm talking to you. Yeah, the Bay Carna used to run from mostly down at Scarness, and there was always a Bay Carna queen of princesses, and they were judged, and then they rode on one of the floats, and the floats all followed, a bit like the wild parade we have today, which is also changing.
Yeah, that reminded me of it, because I've been on some of the floats for the Whale Festival parade and that. I was just relating back to it, and I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, I don't think it was always called. It was called the Bay Carn, and then it changed to the something festival, and then the Bay Carn. Another thing going back a long way, I've just remembered, used to come to the Albion Harbour called Miller's Carnival. That used to come every year, and that goes right back to the 1950s. And they used to bring in the big merry-go-rounds. Merry-go-rounds back in those days were a bit different. They wouldn't be allowed today because they'd be classed as too dangerous. But you get on them, and the horses, you do quite high off the ground. You get on them, and the more effort that you put in, the further out you swung on these great big merry-go-rounds. They were just absolutely marvellous. And it was a real festival, and the Miller's Carnival was here. Another function that they used to have was called a fishing contest. It was called Willie the Whiting. A whiting would be caught and tagged, and then the people would win a big prize if they could catch Willie the Whiting. I think Willie the Whiting was long gone, but people still spent a lot of time out there trying to catch him. Yeah. And also, in conjunction with Willie the Whiting, they would have fishing contests as well. And whoever caught the biggest fish in the whatever fish, a parrotfish whatever.
Yeah, it's similar to what we have today. I think
Yes, the fishing contest is still the same.
Yeah.
So it goes right back to the 50s.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, they were wonderful, and they were all held on the oval at Payalba. Yeah, oval and Payalba has been used right back to my father's day. He was born in 1924, and he always remembered the oval.
Yeah.
So it goes back a long, long way.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where Hervey Bay's roots come from to blossom out to the tree we have today.
That's right. And well, see, when I was growing up, there was no connection from Main Street, Payalba. It went up through the Payalba Caravan Park and up Main Street. There was no connecting road through to Stevenson Street, Scarness, or Zephyr Street, Scarness. And it wasn't until the 1980s that the council put that road through and took a little bit of the slice off the oval. They didn't know whether to put it on the seaside of the oval or where it is there now, which I think they chose the best way through there. Yeah. And I love that drive through there before you get to Wetside.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, it reminds me of Daintree Rainforest through those lovely fig trees. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they took the road away from going right through the middle of the caravan park. That's the way it used to be originally.
Yeah, just the development of Hervey Bay is now learnt about.
Yeah,
just
that's
from
right.
talking to you.
It's all changed, yes. And there used to be more caravan parks. There was caravan parks out at Point Vernon, at Damon Park, Urangan. There's still caravan parks all along the front there, like Torquay and Scarness, yes. Well, I mean, at this time of the year, the caravan park is starting to fill up because it's the schools all breaking up.
Yeah, Christmas season.
That's right. That was my mum and myself out in Gallagher's Bay. Turn that round, sorry. That would be going back to the 1940s. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful memories. I lived out at Point Vernon, and back in those days, Lenny Rose had a boat shed out there, and he used to lease out boats. People would come, the fishermen, a lot of these Maryborough people who came down, shop owners, people who own businesses up there would come down to the bay and want to go fishing for the day. And there was no outboard motors back in those days, so you would hire a boat from Lenny Rose, and he would launch it by putting rollers in front, behind the boat, and then rotate it around so it's a roller, and then you get whatever will come from there. And then you would have to row all the way out to your fishing spot.
Yeah, so you have the rollers to push it off, and then...
That's right. And then have to make sure you came in on full tide so as you could unload your boat and everything. But it wasn't until the little tiny, I think, seagull outboard motors came in that people could go further out fishing. Yeah. And that expanded because back in those days the fish were much more plentiful. My father was another great one for, he worked on the council, and on his way home of an afternoon, if he saw a dark patch in the water, it meant a shoal of fish, which were not allowed today, but back in those days he had fishing nets. So he had 4 daughters, no sons at that stage, and he would come home and he'd say, right, kids, we're going fishing. So the fishing net went into the boat, and we launched the boat, and then went round in front of, down the hill from right out of Point Vernon, and you would launch the net round the ends of the shoal, the gutters of rocks there, and wait until the tide started to go out, and that's where you could get your fish. Yeah. But I mean, that was legal back in those days. People could go along the rocks out there with a metal hook and get mud crabs out from under the rocks. Yeah. But none of that's allowed today, and you couldn't allow it today because there'd be no fish and no crabs left.
Yeah, you've got to keep it even.
That's right. And that's why I was talking about this Benny Gala before. He was well known by a lot of the business people in the bay, or more wealthy people, that he had a knack for getting crabs. So they would take him out to river heads and leave him there, and he would spend hours, and he would end up with a whole bag of crabs. And all he needed for it was a bottle of wine, because he liked his wine. Okay. And at 6 o'clock of a day, back in those days, the hotels shut at 6 o'clock. So everybody would come in for I think they called it the 6 o'clock squill. All the men would like to come in and have their quick beers before the hotel shut. Yeah. And Benny would come along with his bag of crabs, and he would sell them to different people in there. Good idea. And he would sell them, and he'd wait till that person started to drink, and they'd put the crabs on the ground. So Benny would come and he'd reclaim the bag of crabs, and he would keep selling them all through the night, because the more the men consumed them, they forgot they'd bought the crabs, and it was the last person who bought the crabs that actually took them home. Yeah. He was a very cunning man, but he was an icon of the Bay, Benny Gala. I'm going to do a story about him one of these days in my history column. Yeah. A very great man, yeah. And a true blue Aboriginal man with a knack for catching crabs. Yeah.
As a community, we are extremely fortunate to have someone with the passion and knowledge as Bev. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode on Hervey Bay history. If you'd like to find out more about our fascinating history and the development of the Bay, please have a look in the local history section of the Hervey Bay Library.